Okay, this is going to be a video to show Camera Freak how to adjust for a good exposure. A good exposure is when that little needle right there is dead center. I'm just going to go ahead and turn the dial, don't worry about it, until this thing is dead centered. That's what you're going to want to see there, right there, and that'll tell you that your exposure is correct, that it's centered. You get that by holding the shutter button halfway down, and it will show you. That's how you find out. So right now, for my settings right here in my house with my lights, it's ISO 1600 at f4 at 1/2000th of a second. If I wanted to raise my aperture, you do that by touching this button right here, holding it in. You can see the little square box around aperture, and then turn the knob. I'll turn it to f11. That's a very small aperture. Now I'll hold the button halfway. Watch what happens. Now it's way underexposed because I made the pipe smaller and the shutter speed stayed the same and the aperture stayed the same. If you turn one thing, one of the other two remaining things has to change along with it. In this case, I have to slow the shutter speed down. Now watch the little watch it. I'll just keep slowing it down, and there it is, back in the center, or thereabouts anyway. So now it's back in the center. So at f11, I had to slow my shutter speed down to 125 at 1600th to get that little needle right in the center. Okay, so that means wherever you go, whatever room you're in, the first thing you're going to want to do is set up a basic shutter speed. In this, like 1/25th, that's a good speed. That's no big deal. It's holdable. And then you're going to want to just touch that shutter. If you're inside, push the ISO button to show the ISOs, and you're going to want, 800 ISO anyway, at least. So you turn it on 800 ISO at 1/25th and touch the thing halfway. 800 ISO at 1/25th f11, at least in my house, pointed toward the window, is perfect right there, right in the center. It's perfectly exposed. Now what happens if I wanted a higher shutter speed? I turn the shutter speed by turning the dial, 1/60th, 200, 250th, 320, 500th. My dogs are going crazy. I want to take pictures of my dogs inside, and I can't do it at f100 at 800 ISO because I changed this. One of these two things has to change. The pipe has to get bigger because the spigot is staying on shorter. So I have to hold the aperture button in and lower my aperture. There it is. f7.1, call it, there it is. About f7.1 at 1/400th at 800 ISO is about the same thing as I had before. Now it's exposed correctly. Can you see that when you move one of the other two of these three ingredients has to change? If the shutter gets slower, that means the ISO can go down a little bit. If the shutter gets faster, something else has to change to get more light into the camera. The pipe has to get bigger. That means this number gets smaller, or the sensitivity gets higher. That means this number gets higher. But you can't move one thing without affecting the other two. So right now, let's pretend you wanted a really small depth of field. I turn this way down, 2.8. Well, that means at 1/400th and ISO 800, I've got a lot of room. It's letting in a lot of light at f2.8. So I'm going to turn my ISO down to 200 and see what happens. I still have a little bit of leeway. You can see that the little marker there is not in the center. It's above center. I'm almost about 2/3 of a stop, still overexposed. So I'm going to turn my shutter speed higher until you can see that the needle's right in the middle now. So if I want to take a really shallow depth of field picture in my house, I could at 6/40th, ISO 200, f2.8. Don't worry about what these numbers are. Just know that that's how the relationship works. And I think if you see that and you just do that and watch the needle and move around, take a picture, see what the results are, change the settings, hold the thing halfway in, and always center that needle. When that needle's centered, you are going to take a good picture generally. Alrighty.